Are you also here for him? No, I am. I chose him for my degree thesis. Yes, I was told he's an odd fellow, but, he's one of the few who still transmits to me passion for his job. Journalist. Since I was a child, I've always wanted to be a journalist. I remember the magazine in middle school. I was the editor-in-chief, the correspondent, the typographer, and the newsstand attendant. Yes, in short, I did it all by myself. But it was because I've always been passionate about writing articles, interviewing people, hunting for news, and then, over the years, discover the why of things, the dynamics that lie behind the events. And he's one of the few who still understands journalism in this sense. The news detective was he called. His inquiries were very famous, but inconvenient. And perhaps far too inconvenient for some. Yes, because now no one calls him anymore. And he still has that long-standing litigation against the Register of Journalists. Oh, a bad story. He's always been a voice out of the chorus, but in recent years they've accused him of exaggerating. Oh well, I don't know much about that, but I do know that nobody writes the way he does. And therefore, I decided to develop my thesis with him. Also because I have an idea in mind. Oh, the door has opened. Good morning, Professor. Yes, I'm here for my thesis. Yeah, my idea. I'd like to analyze how the press conveys messages relating to the current health emergency. Yes, in other words, how this emergency is narrated. Because, as you taught us, hardly ever have we got anything to do with the events as such, but always with the narrative that over them gets made. I'd like to consider all the major newspapers, outline their editorial line and their impact on public opinion, also giving space to the alternative voices of the so-called independent narrative. Yes, because I am like you, I have a broader view of things. It's a daring project, young man. Perhaps too much. You risk getting lost in it. And besides, why do you want to do it? What do you mean, why? To make a good thesis, young man. Why do you want to do it? Well, Professor, because I have a question here in my head, like a nail I've been hammering on for months, and I can't get it off. I mean, do you remember at the beginning of this emergency when many people were writing on billboards and on linen sheets hanging from windows? Everything will be all right. You see, that statement within me has turned into a question. Will everything be really all right? Getting better already, but not good enough yet. I ask you again, young man, why do you want to do it? Because I'm full of fear and rage, Professor. Because I don't understand anything of what is happening, and I don't know who to believe. I mean, if a friend of mine gets sick, immediately I'm frightened that perhaps this disease is actually as terrible as the newspapers say. While every time I have to wear that mask, I feel suffocated and get enraged. Oh, good. There we are. And why did you come to me? Well, because you are a great journalist. The news detective, young man. why did you come to me? Because the others, Professor, I already know what they will tell me. I mean, Professor Green will ask me to investigate the reasons why people are unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation by persisting with their irresponsible behaviors. While Professor Brown, Professor Brown would have been deep in the underlying aspects of the theoretical epistemology of information. I came to you because I seek a different perspective. You are in the right place then. Read this and come back in a week. Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm. And before handing me the book, he opened it, wrote a short sentence on it, and placed a page marker on the Cinderella's fairy tale. Once I arrived home, I was astonished. A fairy tales book. I have to make my thesis, and all he's given me is a fairy tales book. Perhaps his colleagues are right. He's completely lost his mind. Anyway, Cinderella. Oh, Cinderella. I've never endured that tale. Oh, come on, this one girl who bears all sorts of suffering from her stepmother and the two stepsisters without reacting at all, spending all her time cleaning the house. Until there comes the fairy godmother, by the way, uncalled, who casts the spell on her. And you know, the beautiful dress, the mice into horses, the pumpkin into a carriage. She goes to the royal ball, and then the prince, at the midnight deadline, the crystal slipper. Cinderella. And what is it that he wrote to me here? The story is not what you think. The story is not what you think. Come on, everyone knows the story of Cinderella. All it takes is to have watched the Disney film. A rich man's wife became sick. You see, the mother died, and the father remarried a widow, the stepmother, who had two daughters, the two stepsisters. Look here, it's written. Now began a bad time for the poor stepchild. You bet. She had to do hard work from morning till night. Get up before sunrise, carry water, light fires, cook and wash. Besides this, the sisters did her every imaginable injury. They mocked her and emptied her peas and lentils into the ashes, so that she was forced to sit and pick them out again. In the evening, when she had worked till she was weary, she had no bed to go to, but had to sleep by the fireside in the ashes. And as on that account she always looked dusty and dirty, they called her Cinderella, Cinderella. Everyone knows the story. It happened that the father was once going to the fair. The fair? And he asked his two stepdaughters what he should bring back for them. Oh, beautiful dresses, said one. Pearls and jewels, said the second. And you, Cinderella? Oh, father, break off for me the first branch which knocks against your heart on your way home. This is new to me. On his way home, a hazel twig brushed against him and knocked his hat off. Then he broke off the branch, took it with him, and gave it to Cinderella. Cinderella thanked him, went to her mother's grave, and planted the branch on it, and wept so much that the tears fell down on it and watered it. It grew, however, and became a handsome tree. Thrice a day, Cinderella went and sat beneath it, and wept and prayed, and the little white bird always came on the tree, And if Cinderella expressed a wish, the bird threw down to her what she had wished for. The story is not what you think. In fact, I did not know this version, yet Jacob and William Grimm, fairy tales. But then, what about the Disney film? What's with the story? I cannot understand the thing. Who could possibly help me? Michael, yes, he studied psychology. Hey, hi Michael, hi, thanks, I'm fine. Listen, regarding your thesis, you focused on the archetypes of fairy tales and so on, am I right? Oh, great. Listen, could you possibly send me a copy? Yeah, it's for my thesis, yeah. What do fairy tales have to do with the COVID? I still don't know, Michael. And while awaiting for Michael to send me the file, I kept on reading the tale and uncovered more surprises. In the fairy tale, in fact, no fairy godmother ever shows up, and there is no ding-dong-dang spell that expires at midnight. Two of the narrative cornerstones of the story that we all know, you know, this fairy godmother and the ding-dong-dang deadline of midnight, are simply not there. The story is not what you think. Michael's thesis was very rich and detailed. Thanks to his work, I learned that some stories, Cinderella, but also Little Red Riding Hood, for example, have several versions, in particular two. The fables version and the fairy tales version. And I discovered that there is a substantial difference between them. Let's take Cinderella. Michael, in his paper, writes that the fable invites us to wait passively, while the motion within the fairy tale represents exactly the opposite. It pushes us into action. We could say that the fable tells us, wait, you just wait. And in the meantime, you bear and suffer. Then you'll see that, if you are lucky, the fairy godmother will arrive to save the day. And in any case, the spell does not depend on you. That is the way we are supposed to behave today, right? Waiting passively. No, not for the fairy godmother, but for the vaccine. The fairy tale, on the other hand, invites us to action. Yes, because in the fairy tale, after her stepmother had prevented her from going to the royal ball, it is Cinderella who gets up, leaves the house, goes to her mother's grave, and asks to the white bird, "Give me the most beautiful dress." And so well dressed, all by herself, she goes to that ball. I would have never thought of that. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for the book. Interesting reading. Well, I must confess that at first I was a bit reluctant. I mean, you gave me a book on fairy tales. But afterwards, I liked it. Yes, the story is not what one thinks. You were right. Yes, because I understood that unlike the fable, the fairy tale invites us to action, to get up, to ask for what we want, not to suffer. Good moral of the story. Anyway, as far as my thesis is concerned, I would have thought of doing a comparative analysis of the different newspapers to see, leave the newspapers alone, young man. You already know what they write. And the book. Take it back. Keep it for another week. And this time round, read the fairy tale even more carefully. And like the last time, he opened it, wrote something on it, and gave it back to me. And like the last time, when I arrived home, I was astonished. What was I thinking of? Couldn't I have gone like everyone else to Professor Green or Professor Brown? No. I chose him, the only one who makes me waste my time like this. And what is it that he wrote to me this time? Find the hidden spells. Oh God, even spells now. I dropped the book on the sofa and sat in front of the PC to do a research on the professor, which I should have done before asking his guidance on my thesis. Anyway, Wikipedia spoke of the undoubted talent and the great investigations of the news detective, but also stated that in recent years he had embraced the most absurd theories, seeing mysteries everywhere and trying to explain social dynamics through symbols, archetypes, and other esoteric formulas. Then I searched the name of the professor, followed by the word spells, given the sentence he wrote to me. And the title of one of his books, no longer on the market, popped up. Hidden Spells. I found a used copy and had it delivered to me. As soon as it arrived, I started reading it. Basically, in that book, the professor argues that fairy tales are not fictional stories, but the detailed description of our inner self and of the social dynamics that condition it. In this latter point, he pauses to particularly analyze spells. He writes that in fairy tales, anyone who falls under a spell usually falls asleep, is petrified, or is transformed into a ferocious beast. The professor states that these very spells happen to us in our everyday life. Yes. We fall asleep when we no longer question ourselves. We turn to stone when we panic, and we become beasts instead when we are enraged. Every day we fall victims to spells, and the spells, act both on a personal level, but also on a social level, affecting entire populations. And one of the main vectors of their social dissemination is the mainstream media. That is the way in which facts are told. Yes, because the perception we have of reality almost never has anything to do with the reality itself, but rather the way it is told to us. Find the hidden spells. Well, in the fable, the spell is evident. It is cast by the fairy godmother. But what about in the fairy tale? Where are the spells in the fairy tale? Abracadabra, abracabron. What I don't want is already gone. Abracadabra, abracabrir. All that I wish is already here. The circus magician, when he was little, he came to town with a stubble beard, earrings, some dark circles around his eyes. It was enough for him to say this formula, and us children were catapulted into his magical world, made up of princesses, heroes, and dragons. Abracadabra means I create what I say. All magic formulas work through words. Then, perhaps, even the magic spells the professor spoke of work through the words of the characters in the fairy tale. Yeah, the words of the mother on her deathbed. Oh, my child, always be docile and good. Quiet living, obedience, magic spell. Or those of a stepmother before leaving for the royal ball, you cannot dance. You are worth nothing. You'll never make it. Magic spell. Abracadabra, abracabron. What I don't want is already gone. Abracadabra, abracabrir. All that I wish is already here. Professor, thank goodness I met you. I wanted to tell you that I believe I found the spells. Yeah, they are those of the mother and of the stepmother. Resignation, always be docile and good. And depreciation, you cannot dance. And I thought that when I'm resigned, or when I think I'm not worthy, I remain immobile, like Cinderella, who always stays at home to clean. And so, maybe the whole fairy tale is about the spell of stillness, which is exactly what we are experiencing today, right? We are resigned, devalued, petrified. Like Cinderella at the beginning, we always stay at home with a stepmother telling us what to do or not to do, what to think or not to think. I see that this time you have read the fairy tale more carefully. Very well, boy. And how does Cinderella break this spell of stillness? Oh God, I don't know, Professor. Take the fairy tale and read the part where the stepmother casts her spell. Fairy tale, yes. Where is it? Here. The stepmother said, "You are not coming because you have no clothes and you cannot dance. We should be ashamed of you." She turned away from her and hurried off with her 2 cocky daughters. Cinderella went to her mother's grave and cried, "Plant, shake yourself, and you, little golden and silver bird, cover me." And the little white bird threw her a dress of gold and silver, and slippers quilted in silver and silk, and so dressed she went to the ball. Did you see, boy? Did you see how she dissolves the spell? Disobeying. Her stepmother commanded her to stay at home. She obeys twice, yes, but the third time she gets up and leaves the house. She gets up, that is, she no longer bends over to suffer. She gets up, that is, she no longer believes in everything the authority tells her and orders her, and leaves the house. What does the house represent? It represents the world we already know, our securities, which protect us, yes, of course, but at a certain point become limiting. Cinderella gets up and leaves the house. And you, boy, what do you want to do? Professor, I just know that what I already know is no longer enough for me. Well, it means that your hazel twig, like Cinderella's, has become a sturdier tree that can house the white bird or the inspirations coming from heaven. Now you can ask it to grant your requests. What requests, Professor? The ones you came to me with. To make a good thesis. To know if everything will be really all right. And to undo the spells of fear and rage. Now you can have some answers. But I must warn you, boy. If you follow along this path, you'll meet the prince, your inner authority. And he, the prince, will turn everything you thought to upside down. Are you ready for this? When do we start, Professor? Right away. For tomorrow, I want a documented analysis of how the press is delivering the message on this health emergency. Look at a short time span. Don't be distracted by the narrative of the press. Stick to the hard data and find out everything you can. Be a journalist. Yes, finally! I went home and immediately got to work. I analyzed the second week of August 2020. Peak of infections in central Italy. Infections tripled in Venice region. Monday, 412 positives. Wednesday, 529 positives. Sunday, 643 positives. The curve goes up, the curve goes up. Stop, stop. Focus, focus. You are a journalist, and a journalist sticks to the hard data. Don't be distracted by the narrative of the press. The data, the data. Okay, here. Monday, 412 positives out of 40,000 swabs. While on Sunday, there were 643 positives out of 72,000 swabs. So, if I do the math, it turns out that on Monday, the infected were 1%, while on Sunday, there were 0.9%. So the contagion curve rises, but the percentage of infected remains stable. And why then has no one told this data like this? Find out everything you can, find out. Here, this national newspaper, 26 August. The high number of deaths includes subjects, mostly elderly, who died in the area, not in hospital, in the last few days. Most patients were infected by the virus in recent months and in the meantime turned back negative, but under the guidelines of the Ministry of Health were counted as positive to COVID anyway. Morning, Professor. Do you remember what you told me the first time I came here? Yeah, that my project was too, what did you say? Was too daring. You think you were right. I think this thing is far too big for me, right? I don't think I can manage. Oh, well. I see you have met your prince. What do you mean, Professor? The fairy tale. Read it from where you left it last time. Still the fairy tale. Okay, here. She went to the ball. The prince came to meet her and danced with her all evening. Cinderella danced until late at night. Then she wanted to go home. It's strange, isn't it? Cinderella went out of her way to go to that ball. And now that she's there in the prince's arms, what does she choose? To leave. Why is Cinderella leaving, boy? I really don't know, Professor. For the same reason you want to leave now. If you're not used to dancing, you get dizzy. The prince shows us such unexpected perspectives that they make us dizzy. And we get scared, so we need to move away. It's normal. I had warned you, boy. The prince would have turned everything you thought to upside down. Because this happens when the prince, our spirit, takes Cinderella, our soul, by the hand and make her dance. What is it that scared you, boy? I don't know, Professor. But for example, how the deaths are counted. I mean, if I catch the virus, then I recover from it and die of something else, I am counted as a COVID death the same. But what's the point? We could assume that this criterion of the Ministry of Health is the result of simple incompetence, of bad faith, or a mixture of the two. But there is something more you have experienced in all of this. Your prince has led you to the edge of an abyss. We all rely on socially recognized, stable convictions to live on. But what if they crumble? And one of the deepest beliefs is that the state protects us, our lives, through health services. But what if that was not to be the case? What if we could no longer trust the state? What could we rely upon? Emptiness. And in the face of this emptiness, our head starts spinning. And so we get scared and want to leave. It's quite normal. So the fairy tale tells us. Listen, boy. Do as Cinderella did. Go home, sleep on it, and see you again tomorrow. Sleep on it. Sleep on it. Sleep on it. Cinderella danced until late at night. Then she wanted to go home. The story is not what you think. Find the hidden spells. Here we need to add another. Learn to dance. The circus magician. I saw him again a few years later. Same beard, same earrings, a bit more dark circles around his eyes. He still repeated the exact same magic formula. And the children, like me back in the days, were catapulted into his magical world, made up of princesses, heroes, and dragons. At the end of the show, I joined him and asked him if he really believed in it. I mean, does magic exist? I do tricks, boy. Tricks. The real magic is in the intention with which you do something. The magic is in the intention. I want to learn to dance. I want to learn to dance. Professor, I didn't get much sleep last night. I went on reading all the alternative media websites. This is a disaster. As of September 2020, there have been 40,000 deaths associated with COVID. There are over 60 million inhabitants in Italy, so this virus killed 0.07% of the population. 0.07%. In 2020, many deaths were caused by wrong treatments. But now we know better how to treat the disease. The vast majority of those infected are asymptomatic. They are healthy. Bill Gates is the #1 WHO financier and therefore heavily conditioned their young man. No, Professor, listen here. It's important. The Ministry of Health had advised medical examiners against performing autopsies. Had there not been some defiant doctors, who knows how many other people would have died from wrong treatments? The masks have a mesh many times larger than the virus, wanting to stop the virus with the young man. Stop. You are under the spell of rage. Breathe and calm down. Calm down? But sir, here one must rebel. Or do you preach well but then end up being like everyone else? He cast his gaze upon me and stared at me for a long time. Then he got up from his chair, put on his jacket, and walked out. I took my things and followed him. He crossed the campus, the street, and the park until he sat on a bench by the river. I'm sorry, Professor. When I'm afraid, I get nervous, and now I am afraid. Yeah. Afraid of what I might discover should I continue to investigate, and afraid of ending up like you. Yes, that I too, like yourself, will end up with labels stuck on me, which will never go away. You know, son, when they started calling me crazy, conspiracy theorist, when they even accused me of being an enemy of my own country, I reacted exactly like you. Reputation. We spend a lifetime building up a good reputation, and then, at any moment, they can destroy it. What did you find out that was so inconvenient, Professor? Nothing much, really. I, like so many before me, came across the veil of hypocrisy that shrouds many rooms of power. Unlike others, I lifted that veil. And would you do it again? Do you know what you see when you look someone in the eye? Someone who is willing to do anything to keep his reputation intact. The void. I do not want to have empty eyes. You have a pure gaze, boy. Defend it. The rest doesn't matter. And don't cultivate rage. It leads you nowhere. On the contrary, it rots you inside and ruins you. But then, what must be done? Keep calm and carry on, no? No, my boy. Rage must neither be extinguished nor removed, but rather transformed. And how do you do that? Are you sure you want to know? Oh no, the prince, again. It would make me dizzy again, isn't it? What do you want me to tell you, Professor? Since we are on the dance floor, let's dance. These were the exact same words my grandfather used to say. And he also said that sometimes there is no way to explain something. Sometimes it's better to tell a story. Then he looked at me and began to recall the fairy tale his grandfather used to tell him.
Once upon a time, there was a young woman who lived in a small village at the edge of a fragrant pine forest. Her husband was far away, fighting a long war. When he finally discharged, she was so happy that she immediately went to the market to buy the best ingredients and prepare a delicious meal. But when he finally got home, he did not greet her. He did not even enter the house. Instead, he went straight into the woods to sleep on a rock, as he had gotten used to doing while at the front. Meanwhile, she finished cooking her meal, and with great trepidation, "I made this for you." "Leave me alone," sending the rice spreading across the floor, the spice meat through the air, and the vegetables down the path. He was so enraged that she was almost frightened by him. That night, she did not sleep. She turned and turned under the covers until in the morning, while getting up, she had an idea. The old healer lady, I'll go to see her. She will surely know what to do. And at sunup, she gathered all her stuff and went immediately to the outskirts of the town, to the hut where the old healer lady lived. She found the healer busy as usual, sat by the fire, fiddling with her strange stills and surrounded by spices and herbs. "Good morning, young woman. What can I do for you?" "Good morning, holy lady. It regards my husband. He has come seriously disturbed by the war. He rages constantly and does not want to eat anything. He always wants to stay outdoor and no longer wishes to live with me as he used to. Can you give me a potion to make him kind and loving again?" "Yes, I think I can do that for you. But let me see, I need a special ingredient. Unfortunately, I ran out of it. A hair from the bear of the crescent moon. So let me see. Ah, yes. Do you see that mountain up there? Well, I need you to climb up that mountain, and at the very top of it, you will find a black bear, a huge one. Pluck one hair from the white crescent moon-shaped patch of fur on its neck. Bring me one such hair. Then I can give you what you need, and your life will be beautiful again." Many women would have been discouraged. They would have considered such an endeavor simply impossible, but not her, because she was a woman in love. "Oh, I'm so grateful to you. It's so nice to know that something can be done." And so to get ready for her climb, she went back home and placed in the backpack some food and some clothes, and the next day, very early, she started her ascent. All throughout the climb, she chanted gratitude. "Thank you, mountain, for letting me climb onto your body. Thank you, flowers, for the joy and hope you bring. Thank you, stones, for showing me the way forward. Thank you, trees, that rise your foliage so that I can pass." Now the path became more challenging. The mountain had thorny flowers that got caught off her dress, and stones so sharp that they peeled off her minute hands. Strange black bears flew towards her in the twilight, closer, frighteningly faster. But she then recalled that these were the spirits of the dead who had no relatives, and for them she chanted, "I will be your relative. I will ensure that you can rest." She continued further on because she was a determined woman in love. She continued farther until she eventually started to see the snow at the top of the mountain. Her feet got cold and wet, but she continued on because she was a woman in love. A storm broke out, and the snowflake pierced her eyes and ears. Although blinded, she kept on going until eventually she reached the top of the mountain. She took refuge on a small cave, so small that she could barely fit inside. She did not eat any of the food she had brought along, but rather covered herself in leaves and soon fell asleep. In the morning, the air was calm, and she knew the time had come to find the crescent moon bear. She searched all day, and at dusk, she found a large pile of wood and no longer needed to search because a giant black bear walked heavily on the snow, and then it entered its lair. The woman rummaged in her bundle, and she placed in a bowl some of the food that she had brought along, and furtively the bear smelled the scent of the wood and staggered out of its lair, growling so loud that the stones shook. It walked around the food for a while, and then disappearing back into its lair. The next day, the woman did the same thing, but after setting the bowl in place, she did not return to her refuge, but stopped halfway. And the following day, same thing, but a little closer. And so did the next evening, and then the evening after, until the last evening. She was shaking like a leaf in the wind, but she stayed put right there where she was. And when she finally managed to hold the animal's gaze, looking straight into its eyes, she saw reflected valleys, rivers, forests, and she was no longer afraid. Please, dear bear, please. I have come all this way because I need a cure for my husband who is seriously ill with rage. To cure him, I need one hair from that white crescent moon-shaped patch of fur on your neck. Allow me but one single strand. The bear looked at her and... It is true. You have been good to me. You can take one hair of mine, but then leave immediately and go home. And as the majestic bear raised his muzzle, the woman... and she ran as fast as she could with the precious fur in her hand. She gathered all of her belongings and immediately started to descend towards the town. And as she descended, she chanted gratitude all along. Thank you, mountain, for supporting me. Thank you, flowers. Thank you, boulders. Thank you, trees. By the time she got down to the town, she was all disheveled, completely covered in mud and leaves, her clothes in tatters. She ran into the town and then passed it to the hut where the old healer lady sat, as usual, by the fire, fiddling with her strange stills, herbs, and spices. I've got it! I've got it! The hair of the bear from the crescent moon. Let me see. Oh, yes, good. Real hair from the bear of the crescent moon. What have you done? It's okay, my child. Relax. It's all right. Remember everything you did to climb up the mountain, to win the bear's trust. Do you remember everything that you did, saw, and felt? Yes, I remember it very well. Then, my child, go back home with this new knowledge and behave with your husband the same way that you did with the bear, and your life will be beautiful once more.
The magic is in the intention. And as children, we are all full of intention. As a child, it didn't take anything to turn a chair into a horse. And the whole living room became an infinite prairie, the carpet a rushing river, and beyond the door a world of ever new adventures. And the adults, they smiled, but deep down, I think they didn't understand. No, I believe that they thought that all that world, that horse, that prairie, that river, were faked, as it's generally thought fairy tales are, fake. Instead, the grandfather's fairy tale at the beginning describes exactly what happens to me when I get enraged. I'm a war veteran. My soul is at war. If I'm under the spell of rage, it takes up all my thoughts. And within me, there is no room for any other thought, any other feeling, any other action. To undo this spell, rage must be transformed. And the transformation process goes through several stages. The first is the one that, most of all, makes your head spins. Yes, because what is the first thing the woman in the fairy tale does when she starts climbing the mountain? She gives thanks. Do you want to transform rage? Give thanks. Oh, no, Prince, this is too much for me, right? I am so enraged. What is there to be thankful for? Rage is a fire that consumes you, is a fire that extinguishes your dreams, your joy of living. Do you want to transform rage? Give thanks. Because gratitude, on the other hand, is a fire that warms you and gives you strength. Give thanks for what life gives you every day, for the embrace of your child, for the rising sun. Gratitude fills you up with joy, love, and beauty. And then, with these forces, fight for what you think is right. Give thanks and fight. And we all possess the strength to do that, much more than we think. In each of us, there is a mighty and proud bear. And as the old woman's final gesture shows us, there is no salvation to wait for, no magic potion to save us from the outside. Strength is within us. Pride is within us. Salvation is within us. We and our own mighty bear, grateful, proud, and strong. This changes the world. And so, with all the strength of my inner bear, in the following weeks, I sat to work hard on my thesis, describing in detail the spell of fear that pervades the narrative of the official media, and the spell of rage that risks holding a grip on the narrative of the alternative media. I also illustrated in depth the strategies to undo these spells. Having the courage to think and ask questions dissolves fear. Thanking and using our inner strength dissolve rage. Oh, these were so hectic weeks that the day of my thesis arrived in a heartbeat. Oh, but I dreamed about it so much that day. Every night in bed, I imagined the satisfied looks of the professors, their vigorous handshakes, and their pleased smiles. But it wasn't anything like that. No, that day I didn't even have time to conclude my presentation that Professor Green accused me of having unjustly placed the whole category of journalists under a bad light, while Professor Brown complained that my thesis didn't have a sufficient theoretical corpus, and he embraced rather bizarre visions of reality and not at all scientific. And neither of them shook my hand. Professor, I'm sorry I disappointed you. You haven't disappointed me, son. As a matter of fact, I'm proud of you. Why are you looking at me like that? Because we are not done yet. What? The thesis? No, look, it's over. And for a long while, I didn't want to think about it anymore. I wasn't referring to your thesis. Still the fairy tale, Professor? Yes. And we haven't answered one of your questions yet. Which one? Will everything be really all right? Look, here the answer is very easy. No, it won't be all right with the COVID and neither with my poor journalistic career, that's for sure. How many times does Cinderella go to the royal ball? 3. And you? How many times have you danced with your prince? Well, when I fell under the spell of fear, that of rage... Oh, no. Are you telling me that a third dance is missing? Yes. And will my head spin? Very much. No, Professor, listen. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Everything just fell apart with my thesis. Sometimes life doesn't wait, son. Sometimes the next dance comes right away. And besides, in my opinion, your prince would tell you that today went well. Went well? Ask Professor Green or Professor Brown if it went well. You know, son, I watched you as you answer their criticisms. Your shoulders were straight, your voice firm. You are stronger than you were yesterday. There is more courage in you than ever before. So yes, your prince would tell you that today went very well. Because you have changed. You have become better. Everything can be experienced as an opportunity to grow. And if sometimes we can't change the external reality, we can always change the internal one. Takes the health emergency you mentioned in your thesis. Did the COVID confront us with a fear of death? Then we can ask ourselves what is worth living for and do it without any further hesitation. Do the media manipulate the news? Then we can spread the truth we know and always sort out new ones. Is there anyone who wants to block us? Then we can unlock, first of all, our thoughts, our dreams. Is there anyone who wants to lock us up in fear? Then we can find together new forms of civil disobedience and take responsibility for our daily choices. Professor, talk about some prince. You really know how to make my head spin. Everything can help to grow up, doesn't it? This will take me some more time. Well, now that the thesis is over, I can give you the book back. Oh, no, son, it's yours now. But may I write a dedication? And then she sat down on the stool, took her foot off the heavy clog, and slipped it into the shoe. It fit her perfectly. And when she got up and the king gazed into her face, he recognized the beautiful girl with whom he had danced and said, "It's you. It's you. It's you." The story is not what you think. Find the hidden spells. Learn to dance and have a good trip. Thank you, Professor. Have a good trip.